I'm listening. Thank you. 3, 2, 1.
Right on top of it, as always, Steve Sipple counting us in there,
Yep.
saying thank you to the lovely Zoom voice that you can't hear that tells us
That's
the recording.
fancy.
It is fancy. We're a high-tech operation around here. That's why we're still doing our podcasts over Zoom in our own office, in our home offices.
We got to give the people what they want, video capability.
Well, they certainly want more of this face. That's for sure.
No doubt. How could you not?
It's a Friday afternoon, 2:45. It's a brisk. What's the temperature right now? It's down about 15 degrees from yesterday, I think.
Yeah, all the way down to like 90.
Yeah, I got 83.
Is it drizzling? Is it drizzling outside?
Not at my house. It isn't.
Not up here. It was earlier though.
Yeah. Was it?
It drizzled. I went down to Omaha and got my College World Series credential today, and it kind of rained on me a little bit driving home.
You drive all the way there to get that?
Yeah, I just wanted to avoid the crowds.
Nice job, Bazzy.
Not a big crowd guy.
Yeah.
So, went in, drove right in, parked, walked, got it, zipped through the fan area quick, came home. It was a nice little trip.
All right.
Bought you a
That's
t-shirt.
Cool. So. When are you heading up there for the games?
I'm not real sure yet. I think our intrepid part-timer Luke is going up there early part of the tournament. So I'll probably go later on once we get into the elimination rounds and the championship. They saved the big dog for the late innings. They saved Kevin Kopps for the late innings.
You're kind of like
the dog.
You're kind of like Josh Hader a little bit. You're like an overpowering.
I got some dog in me. Yeah. I'm all about the throwdown, as Will Bolt likes to say.
All right. We're going to talk about the Big Red Blitz, if you don't mind. And
we're going to call it Blitz
Pickup.
Don't mind.
Yeah, Blitz Pickup. Yeah, Blitz Pickup.
I mentioned that before the podcast, and Sipple cracked up, and I should have saved it for the podcast.
Yeah. Parker went to Baz. Parker really bit the bullet and went to Kearney and North Platte.
No, he went to North Platte and Broken Bow.
He went to. All right, we're off to a rough one. North Platte and Broken Bow.
Home of the Bulldogs, home of the St. Pat's Irish, Broken Bow, home of the Indians. And
you got some individual time with Scott Frost. What was that? What were your takeaways from your trips?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I hit the road early and went out to North Platte and Frost talked on Wednesday. Yes, on Wednesday for the Big Red Blitz. And Frost was out there with Nate Lenzer, who's the new assistant basketball coach, and then Ben Murray, who's the new associate AD for development. Ben Murray had kind of a funny line, development. Obviously, the biggest thing going there is the Go Big project, $155 million project, but Ben's brand new. And so he got up and he said, introduced himself, and he's from West Virginia and he's just getting here and settled in. And he said, I'm going to tell you about our $155 million facility of which we've already raised more than $80 million. And I can confidently tell you that I've had nothing to do with it. Pretty funny. But Frost, it was interesting. I think it was similar in Kearney later in the day. It was a smaller crowd, I think, than Scott Frost is probably typically dealing with if he goes out in public and speaks. And so it was about Frost himself, while Greg Sharp was talking and the other guy cycled through, Frost got up and he said, well, I just counted, and by my count, here's one more coming in, so we're at 121. And so he was pretty loose. He had a little game that he had set up where he'd ask a question of the crowd, and then after some responses, then someone would ask him a question, and it just sort of went like that for maybe a half hour. And it was interesting. Had a chance to catch up with him for a few minutes before, and there's just a couple of procedural things we talked about that they're really going to be. We're going to talk about recruiting later, but they don't know exactly how the rules recruiting wise are going to work, or the class size is going to work this year. And so they're basically planning on having a really small class. He told me maybe down, around 15 high school kids in their 22 recruiting class. We talked about Marquise Stepp. They're convinced that Stepp's going to be healthy and ready to go when camp starts in late July after that foot injury. Held him out most of the spring. He's confident in what his quarterbacks have done this offseason so far. And then, when he was talking with the group, he talked a little bit about name, image, and likeness and the changes that are coming there. And not only the good parts of it, and it's interesting whether it's the transfer portal or NIL, Frost has sort of somewhat nuanced views about both of them, where he acknowledges the parts that the student athletes are really going to benefit from and that he likes about both of those sort of arenas. And then also, is in his mind realistic about what some of the pitfalls are or might be. So interesting day all around there. Not every day you get to do a radio hit while watching like a heron on the North Platte River, which I did before I headed out of town for Broken Bow. So
Really?
Yeah.
Really? You saw a heron?
Yeah, I pulled off. There's a park, like when you go north out of North Platte, I think it's Highway 83. Right when you get to the river, there's a little campground and a park there. So I was doing a radio hit right about then, and I had plenty of time, so I just pulled off, and I was sitting there, and there's this big heron like right down the way, and so
it's God's country out there.
Yeah, it is. It's God's country. And so then then a woman and her dog were sort of wading out into the river. So the heron and this woman and her dog were sort of, Mother Nature's battle for real estate. So it was quite something. That's a nice drive too now from North Platte.
You just got pretty deep there, young man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That'll happen out in the Sandhills. You do a little philosophizing.
You get out on the open road, and who knows what's going to happen.
I'd go get lost in the Sandhills.
It was a day of reflection.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. How do you feel about Frost? Should Frost in his position bypass expressing the qualms he has with the spiral of college football? Joking. Should he not maybe? I mean, do you honestly? It's an honest question. Should he maybe put a cap on some of the stuff he says?
Well, it caused. There was.
I don't think he should. By the way, I do not think he should. But I'm interested in your opinion.
Yeah, and people that are listening to this probably know this, but Sipple is referring at least in part to a little bit of a dust up that ensued after the Kearney stop, which I wasn't at. In fact, I didn't know about this until Sipple told me about it at like 10 o'clock or something later that night because I was driving. But Frost was talking about the transfer portal. And the interesting thing is he said essentially the exact same thing in North Platte that he did in Kearney, except for in North Platte, there was one little comment that he didn't make, which was we've had one guy who, transferred from here and then already is transferred from the next place to the next place. And it was a pretty clear, comment directed toward Luke McCaffrey's situation. But the funny thing is he could have just as easily said they've had two guys do that because Keyshawn Green has done the same thing. He left a little before Luke did, but I don't know, Sipple. Then Christian McCaffrey and Max McCaffrey chimed in on Twitter and all that. Like, I guess you could take it as being disparaging, but like it happened, right? It happened. Like Luke went to Louisville and then he left there and now he's going to Rice. Like, it's not the end of the world. It's not even necessarily a bad thing. There's some columnists out there who might think that means college football is circling the drain, but like who cares? Like if he ended up in a situation now that he wants to be in, more power to him. That's fine. But Nebraska is going to lose guys into the portal and they're going to get guys out of the portal every year. It's just the way it's going to be. And so I didn't think Frost was really like belly aching about it. I just thought he said what he thought. But I do. There's probably a reason why some coaches only talk about the guys they get out of the portal and they don't say anything about the downside of it.
Yeah, I think Frost just has some legitimate concerns about just the effect it has on kids' lives and the effect on the sport he loves. Yeah, and I think he has to be a little careful in expressing himself, but there's nothing wrong with expressing that.
No, and
He
the
does-
funny thing is, in North Platte, I don't know, I didn't listen to his whole talk in Kearney, but like in North Platte, he talked about there's not nearly enough spots for everybody that transfers, and some guys, they think they're going to enter the portal and have 50 schools recruiting them, and it just doesn't happen that way. But then after he talked about sort of the pitfalls of it, he talked about how happy they are to have Chris Kolarovic and Samari Toure on the roster, and how excited they are about Marquise Stepp getting healthy, obviously a transfer from USC. So, I mean, and then now he couldn't talk about Tyreek Johnson on Wednesday, although it looks like Tyreek Johnson's on campus as of today.
Yeah. He's talking.
So-
Did you see the tweet from Tyreek Johnson? Interestingly.
Yeah, about NIL, right?
Yeah, he said any local companies that want to use my social media or want me to do commercials to brand themselves, my DM. Then he shared his DM, or he just said my DM is open.
There's been probably a dozen players that have put that same message on their social media today.
I'm going to try that
players?
too. See if it gets me anything.
You're gonna put one out, Bass?
Yeah. DMs are open if anybody wants to do
DMs
some
are open.
advertising.
Throw your
I think
money.
that's fine in my line of work. I think we can do that.
Make your best
So-
offer.
Yeah.
So there's a dozen other Husker athletes that done that.
I think so. I've seen a bunch today. Thomas Fedoni
Okay.
was one of them. I can't remember all the others, but yeah, there's been several.
Yes. So it's here we go, right? Here we go.
Yep. And this is part of what Frost laid out as his concern, maybe you would say, about the transfer portal and the name, image, and likeness, sort of coming down the pipe in the next couple of weeks, probably, is that his thing that he sort of outlined in North Platte was, well, you're going to get some situations in which a kid might be making some money at the school he's at. The schools can help you maximize your marketability, but the schools aren't negotiating deals on behalf of players or anything like that. It's on the player to go sort of be entrepreneurial and figure it out. And Frost was like, we don't really have control over how many marketing deals guys are going to get. And so if a player's unhappy with how much money he's making, and maybe someone's tampering with him and is in his ear saying you can make more money at our place, then he's like, you could have kids transfer to try to go make more money somewhere else. And that's just not really something we have any control over, like how much money a guy's going to make while he's here. We can help him maximize it. And I get that. Like, I totally understand that. It's a fundamental shift in the world of college sports. I understand all that. The flip side of that conversation is people leave jobs to go other places to make more money as a routine matter of opportunity, right, in the working world. And so I don't know, it's a big change. And Frost also expressed a lot, he laid out some of the reasons why he likes NIL and why he thinks Nebraska is going to benefit from it too. So I don't think there's clear black and white lines in what Scott Frost thinks about either of those issues.
No, I don't think there is for a lot of people, because you don't know how it's going to look. You don't know what it's going to look like. So it's hard to know for sure how to judge it right now.
Yeah, it might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years before we really even have any idea what it would look like. Because obviously, like, some stuff's going to happen the first year, and there'll be a reaction to that, and maybe an overcorrection, and then maybe back the other way. It might be a ways down the line before we get a true idea of what this.
It's gonna be interesting. Like, do we cover when a guy signs a deal with if a player, he or she signs a big deal with some sort of entity like Clorox scrubs or something?
I'm sure that's what it's going to be.
Yeah. Lexi's son here for Clorox scrubs.
Keep your apartment clean.
I just stopped at the Time Shop over on O Street today to get a new watch band. And I was thinking, like, maybe Deontay Williams could sign a deal there, and because he'll clean your clock.
Oh, there you go. God, that's good, Parker.
Gee, there might be a market. There's the market. Maybe we should open a side gig. Like, we write all the copy for all these ads for these.
It's good. That's a good one.
There's a lot of people out there that have their hands in the pie. There's people out there that are helping kids sort of like identify their brands, develop it, like you say, Baz, copyright. I mean, there's a lot of people that are gonna help college athletes make money, and who also are out to make money off of college athletes.
Yep. Clean. Yeah, I like that. All right.
We might have to do a podcast someday where we just come up with a bunch of slogans for different athletes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Baz, you were in GI, right?
I was in Grand Island, not far from the motherland for me, not far from the motherland for Scott Frost. A little far away from the motherland for Fred Hoiberg, who was speaking there, way far away from the homeland for Travis Fisher, who was also speaking there. Yeah, Fred was Fred. You know, it was pretty straightforward, you know, kind of the classic dry humor out of Fred. Cracked a joke about wanting to clone himself when all the guys were moving in so he could be a bunch of places at once, and we all laughed at it. You know, it was one of those things. But they've been back to, I think the most interesting stuff from Fred kind of came in the Q&A with the fans and outside of the media part of it. He talked about Sipple, you'll like this. Eduardo Andre now weighs 240 pounds. It's 6'10". Came in as a freshman, 220 last year, and we all saw, you know, the potential that kid had. And what was one of the things to say? Well, if he gets a little bigger, look out. Well, he's 20 pounds bigger now, and he looks like it in a couple of the pictures I've seen. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and he's going to be a guy that's competing for playing time, obviously, right off the bat. He also mentioned they're trying to set up an exhibition with a high major opponent, kind of similar to the Hurricane exhibition a few years ago when they played Mississippi State down in Starkville when Tim Miles was the coach, and all the proceeds went to hurricane relief. It would be kind of a similar deal this year. They'll have their normal, you know, their secret scrimmage, closed door scrimmage. They'll have their exhibition against a Wayne State or a UNK or whoever it may be. Then they're also going to have this exhibition against a high major team and sell tickets for it. It's going to be open to the public, and proceeds going to charity. So it's going to be fascinating to see who that is. I was told it's going to be a familiar old rival of Nebraska's, whatever that means.
Would it be a familiar old alma mater of Fred Hoiberg?
Potentially. There's a young man coaching at that alma mater right now that was on Fred's staff when Fred was at Iowa State. So we'll see what that looks like. But I've also heard that Fred doesn't really have much interest in coaching against his old team either. So we'll see. Now, you probably sell a lot of tickets if Nebraska played Iowa State, especially if you played it in Iowa.
And it wouldn't count. I mean, you know, it wouldn't count to your record, which would maybe be a nice way to do that for Fred.
And also, Iowa State went 0 in the Big 12 last year, so it'd be a good exhibition for Nebraska.
There you go. Yeah, now it makes sense.
So we'll see. It sounds like the schedule is going to be out, hopefully going to be done by the end of this month. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll probably know the answer to that question and who they're going to be playing. But yeah, I thought those are probably the two most interesting things that Fred touched on. He talked about they've only been back to summer workouts for a couple weeks. Bryce McGowan's, as advertised so far, shooting the heck out of the ball. He said Wilhelm Breidenbach, the other big-time freshman in that class, is rehabbing really well from his meniscus tear and may not need surgery, which would be great news for him, of course, and for Nebraska, and has also shot the ball really well, just doing some spot-up, standstill shooting type stuff. But he said, yeah, he likes the group. They've got that core group of guys back that he really liked last year, and now you're trying to integrate those new guys into it. So I think just having the chance to work out in the summer, which they didn't do last year, of course, with the pandemic and everything, that's going to be pretty big for this team. They needed it really bad last year, and they didn't get it. And we saw the results of that. They won 7 games and really didn't play their best basketball until probably the last 2-3 weeks of the season. So I think just having a quote unquote normal summer is going to be really good for them. They've already gotten off to a big start on the recruiting trail with official visitors opened up June 1st. That first weekend was huge for them with some of the names they brought in. A couple more this weekend. You know, they'll hit the road in July and go out and see guys in person. So that'll be the next step of it. But yeah, he said there's been some energy kind of on campus just from having guys visit, taking them around, you know, showing the Hendricks complex, showing them PBA, and bringing guys in that big time guys. Isaac Trout from Grand Island being the kind of the obvious name there. And it was kind of funny because Fred got asked about Isaac about 3 times by the fans. And Fred had, of course, had to say, well, I can't talk about him I can't mention any players specifically by NCAA rule, but he said
but what if there was a skilled 6'9" wing right here in town? Is that something you can talk about?
Again, yes, I would be interested in that. And there are a lot of very good players in Central Nebraska was Fred's response to that question. So, yeah, I think they're in a good spot right now. Just with everything. They like where the roster's at. I think they like the direction they're going in recruiting. Recruiting will be interesting. They don't have any open scholarships for 2022. We have to remember that. And they obviously there's always attrition and things like that. So a couple will probably open up, but they're not recruiting a ton of guys, or they're not probably looking to add a ton of guys for 2022, just kind of based on what the roster looks like right now. That could obviously change, of course, down the road, but it's going to be interesting. It's a lot of 2023s. That they're looking at. There's obviously some big time 2022 is Isaac Trout. We already mentioned is in that group, and some others. So we'll see what it looks like. But yeah, I think Fred's a guy that's pretty happy with where things are at with his team right now.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
go ahead, Sipple.
No, you go ahead.
No, all right, fine, I will. I was talking to Nate Lenzer, who's the new assistant on the basketball staff in North Platte, and he said it was interesting because he told the crowd. He said, I wouldn't have done this. He said, I watched every game that Nebraska played last year, and I wouldn't have taken this job if I didn't fully believe in sort of like the arc it was on. And then it was interesting when I was talking to him before the event, and the thing that he said that I thought was most interesting was just that he's been, I think, what did he get hired in, like April?
Yeah.
I think he's been around since April. And so he said, he spent a lot of time sort of developing drills and workouts and some development stuff with the core group that was returning, 6 guys or so. And he said what's been really interesting is now in the past 10 days or 2 weeks, since the rest of the new guys have started to show up, he said he's one of the things that he's happiest about is he said, I haven't really had to teach our new guys the same drills that I taught the incoming guys, because that returning 6 is teaching the new guys all the drills, why they're doing them, how to go through them hard and all that. And so he said, I spent a lot of time trying to get the 6 guys to sort of like, get the hang of how I want them to think about development and, drills to improve their games. But then they in turn have done a really good job of teaching all the new guys as they've come in. So Fred called him when he was hired. He called him the best player development guy that he's ever worked with. And you could he sort of lit up talking about that, just about the process of being in the gym with those guys and trying to help them get better.
Yeah. They, if there's one thing this team needed, it was probably individual development. When you go back and look at the numbers, they needed to get better taking care of the ball, need to get better shooting, obviously. And a lot of those shooting issues will get solved by some of the guys they brought in, of course, but that's stuff that you work on and figure out in the summer. And that's what they're doing now. And Fred said, we're spending every day in June is fundamental, basic skill work, footwork, shot mechanics, things like that. And then when July gets here, they'll do more of the team stuff, 4-on-4, 5-on-5, all that sort of stuff. So this month's just about getting the base, which they never did last year. And we saw that with the turnover numbers, with the shooting numbers, especially early in the year. So it's just a deal where the roster's as skilled as it's been since Fred has been here. It's as settled as it's been since Fred's been here. And now they've got a summer where they're not, adding guys up until the middle of May, basically, or having a global pandemic so where they can't get together. It's a normal, this is really the first kind of normal summer / off season Fred Hoiberg's had since he got here. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see the progress. We'll actually be able to, I think, see progress, measure progress with this group come fall, because there'll be enough guys here that were playing last year that will be able to kind of measure them against what they did last year. One other quick note I should mention, Fred was asked about Delano Banton, who of course declared for the NBA draft, kept his option open to return to school. For those that watch the videos the team puts out on Twitter, Delano's been working out with the team. He's still going through that process. I would expect him to be back in Lincoln when school starts. I think this is more of a feedback what do I need to work on? Excuse me, sort of thing. But just wanted to get that tidbit in there that, yeah, Delano's been working out with the team while he's also working on getting feedback from NBA people.
Excellent.
Sipple, where'd you go on the Blitz? Norfolk?
I went to Norfolk, to the Midtown Events Center. It was pretty cool. It's a new event center. If anybody's getting married in Norfolk, that'd be definitely a place you'd want to look. I think the floor is marble. Like it looks like an incredibly expensive floor.
They brought it in from Italy, I think. That's Italian marble.
I mean, it looks like
Both matched marble.
It's a super nice place. Greg Austin, Mike Dawson, Matt Davison, Brandon Meyer, and Paul Klempa, the women's bowling coach, were on hand. Paul Klempa, national championship coach, by the way, Paul Klempa has all his bowlers back from the national championship team. That's 3 All-Americans. One of those 3 All-Americans was the National Player of the Year. So they're loaded. And he's very confident.
I think you need to bring the bowling column back. I think you need to.
Yeah, it's time.
It's time.
The people
are the golden era of bowling at the University of Nebraska.
It'd be a little difficult, but I mean, it would probably have to be a Sunday deal. Just to the way I used to do it was just kind of a quick column. This, by the way, was in the 80s, so we're going back a ways. But Lincoln had a huge. I think it's still a pretty big bowling town. It was certainly a big bowling town back then. You had several guys out on the tour, and at least 1 or 2 women out on the tour. So, yeah, that's how I started, is writing a bowling column. I'd write one again. I love talking to Paul. Paul's a gem. Paul followed a gem too. He followed a legend in Bill Straub, and he talks a lot about that, how it was not that easy, but Bill Moose told him to put your own spin on it, so to speak.
No pun intended for the bowling coach.
That bowling column just writes itself.
There was probably, I think I counted 37 people, give or take. So it wasn't a huge crowd, but I don't know. Like everybody's talking about the lack of people during the Big Red Blitz. I wouldn't have even thought about it if I just existed in a vacuum and I went to Norfolk. I just would have thought it wasn't a big crowd, but it was pretty cool. It was still a good deal, and I think it's important that these tours continue to happen. In fact, I would do 2 a year if you can find 2 good spots on the calendar.
Yeah, it's obviously
critically important in my opinion.
Yeah, it's obviously, these being at noon or 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock on a Wednesday, it's not real easy for people to get away from work or whatever to go to do that. And we were talking about this in the office yesterday. My genius idea was they need to have these things in the evening, 7 o'clock. You can still do it on a Wednesday, do it 7 o'clock or whatever. And then you have Bill Moose do a radio ad, do a TV ad, do a Facebook hit where he says, I've bought a keg for each of our stops, and I'd like you to come have a drink on me and listen to our coaches as they get out to meet you. And you probably solve your attendance problems real quick.
And it could be a prelude to having alcohol at PBA, Haymarket, and maybe eventually Memorial Stadium.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. So there you go. That's not bad marketing.
In your marketing department, you can send that check to Chris Basnett. That's Basnett.
Yes. Okay.
Of the Journal Star.
But yeah, or just have it on a weekend. 1 year they had a whistle stop tour, which was actually pretty cool. They were on a train that was ripping through Nebraska, and they would stop like in Grand Island. I went to the one in Grand Island, and there were a lot. There was actually quite a few. I mean, it was probably 200 people at that. Bo Pelini was there, and that big fullback bass that used to play, Schlesinger, was there. It was actually pretty cool.
That fullback named Schlesinger, maybe you've heard of him.
Saturday, yeah. This was on a Saturday, so it was different. It was a Saturday morning.
Can you imagine Moose conducting a train through Nebraska?
I can't
imagine. Yeah,
I can absolutely. He'd be like a 1800s politician. He'd be like standing on the front of the locomotive.
You
So
could
there you
go
go.
back to the caboose to like he'd have his desk back there, and you could go back there to like.
You know, interestingly, I noticed something in the world that you don't see cabooses anymore. I frequently
True.
get caught. I get caught at that crossing at 33rd and near Cornhusker all the time, and I always see there's no cabooses. You don't see them.
It's a different world, Sip. The world's changing.
It's a
Yeah.
Put a local
cabooseless
on each
world.
end.
I wonder where all the cabooses are now.
Where have all the cabooses gone?
Just a big junkyard of cabooses. Somewhere.
Just a caboose graveyard. Like a graveyard.
Right by the Cadillac Ranch.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. 3:15 now. It's 3:15.
We get a little football talk in here quick. Football
but-
team gotten a couple commits recently, a quarterback and a running back, two
Yes.
positions of need. Richard Torres, your quarterback out of Tejas, 6'6", kind of a galloper, you might say, had a long stride.
Yeah.
Picked up a running back yesterday. Ashton, I'm going to forget his last name. Ashton Hayes out of Nevada. Again, pass catching type, can do it all, sort of back, dual threat back. And Parker, what do you know about those two guys?
Yeah, Richard Torres, otherwise known as Richie Rich. Like you say, Baz, I mean, big arm. He's a tall kid. He looks, when he was on his visit, he looked really thin. I mean, it's just a tall, lanky kid, but he weighs north of 200 pounds already. And his coach, Ricky Locke, told me that, by the time he gets a year in a college weight program, he's probably going to be 6'6" or 6'7" and 235, 240 pounds. So he's just a big kid. He's got pretty serious arm talent. I don't know, people call him raw and that's what it looks like. I don't know if it's that or if it's just, he's running around a lot. He played behind an offensive line that he had guys running at him a lot at Southside. So I'll be interested to see if his game looks different. He takes pride in making plays outside the pocket. So that's definitely part of his game. But second year in a row, Nebraska's ended up with a big, tall quarterback. Him and Heinrich Harburg certainly are going to be physically imposing kids. Harburg, by the way, I heard this week is now got to campus at 195 and now is 6'5" and 218. So we saw him at Friday Night Lights camp a couple weeks ago, and he looked like he'd put on good weight, and he has. And then Ashton Hayes yesterday committed. He put up insane numbers when he was a sophomore in high school out in Reno. He had almost 2,800 total yards of offense as a sophomore, and then ran for essentially 140 yards a game in a shortened season last year. Nebraska's been on him for a while. It wasn't. I don't think a lot of people knew. I certainly didn't until the last couple of weeks. How seriously Nebraska was after him, and frankly how serious his interest in Nebraska was. But an official visit last weekend sort of sealed the deal, and he verbally committed last night. So he's that kind of. I found this really interesting. He's a fast guy. He's 5'11" and 180. He's not a big back. He's not Jaquez Yant or even Gabe Irvin, but he's sort of that change of pace, more of a speed back. And Ryan Held, he said the film that he watched with Ryan Held was mostly Wandale Robinson and Maurice Washington. Maurice Washington was a running back that could play some receiver. Wandale, obviously, a receiver that could play running back. That's kind of how they see him. He's a little bit of a Will Nixon type, even though we haven't seen Will Nixon because of injuries so far. But he's a guy that they think can do a lot of different things. And so they're up to 5 in the class, 4 of those kids, Hayes, Torres, and Chase Androff have all committed this month. So 3 of the 5, I guess, have committed this month already. And then, to go along with the other receiver, Victor Jones, and the linebacker from Columbus, Ernest Hausman. So class is coming together quick. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more in the boat this week or this weekend, maybe at least 1 more or 2 more, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But it's really interesting. I mean, when you think about 5 guys in the class, I mean, they might be targeting only hitting 15 for the year high school wise. So they're, 5 is sort of the rough equivalent of more like 8 or 9 when you're talking about, percentage of spots in the class that are already full at this point.
Tonight. So what is happening tonight?
Tonight. It's great for Smashing Pumpkins song.
Yeah, tonight is the second Friday Night Lights camp of the month, and there's going to be some interesting guys there, including a very young quarterback named Dylan Raiola. He's a 2024 prospect, and if the name sounds familiar, that's because it's Dominic Raiola's son. So we can all feel very old on the one hand, and then on the other hand, one of the most talented quarterbacks that will have been at this camp in several years. He's already got offers from Georgia and from Washington State. He's garnering interest from pretty much all the heavy hitters in college football. He's thrown. I talked to Dom last weekend, and Dylan Raiola has already thrown for Texas, and that's right near where they live. He's thrown for Clemson. He's thrown for Alabama. He's thrown for Georgia. He's going to Notre Dame and Oklahoma later this month. So, he could have just thrown in a private workout this morning in Nebraska. I wouldn't be surprised if they offer him a scholarship this weekend after they see him. Could have just done it behind closed doors and done the recruiting barbecue today and gone on their way. But he told his dad, no, hey, look, if there's going to be a camp out in the stadium under the lights, I want to throw. Let's do it. So he's going to be out there tonight slinging it around, and it'll be interesting to see how it looks. There's going to be a couple, like Ben Bramer, for example, 2023 kid that's already committed to Nebraska, told me he's coming back to work out at this one too. And so it'll be a pretty interesting picture. Dylan Raiola throwing to Ben Bramer at the camp tonight.
How many fans have showed up for this?
That's a good
47,000.
Yeah. I don't know, Sipple. It's hard to estimate when you're in when they're sort of scattered through the West Stadium like that. Maybe I don't know what there was at the first one, 500 people maybe, 300 to 500, something like that. I think in 2019 it was more like 1,500, and I don't think it was that many 2 weeks ago, but that's a really rough guess on my part.
Good number.
There you go.
Yeah, and it'll be
right.
I think it'll be interesting tonight. I think maybe more interesting than the first one. And then the big man camp is on Saturday from 11 to 2. That's open to the public as well. So
we should call this podcast is the big man camp.
We're not.
I
don't know.
No? Is that a no? Okay, no, never mind. Forget I said that.
We have big faces. The big face camp, maybe.
Big face camp.
We have big faces. Me and Parker have big faces.
All right, we need to wrap this thing up quicker.
Yeah, we do need to.
So thanks as always for tuning in. My son's waking up on the baby monitor here.
All right.
So I'm going to go grab him. We'll talk to you guys next week. And until then, stay safe. We'll talk to you soon.